We may as well, I'll ruin the suspense for you right away. As you might have guessed, we do not think that the contract, the proposed fire contract, should be approved, at least not in the form that it's in right now. We'll explain why. Again, I said our purpose is to inject the private sector view into these debates. Contract was drafted. We think it has some serious flaws. Can everybody see okay, or do we need to turn the lights down a little? It looks like it's okay. All right. Dave and I were among the people who went. Councilman Franklin Thompson, thank you for joining us. Thank you for addressing our monthly meeting earlier this month and for joining us tonight. Dave and I were down there talking to the city personnel board, and it just did not seem willing to engage. In fact, the only time we kind of got lectured by one of the board members who said, you know, we got the Alliance for the Private Sector, and there was another citizen, Levon Williams, came in just as a citizen testifying, saying that this package is like it's in another universe when you're a person struggling out there in the private sector trying to make it. And we were pretty much lectured by one of the personnel board members who said, you people coming in and talking about the private sector, that's irrelevant. That's immaterial. We're talking about the public sector. We have a different set of rules. It's a different environment. We're getting the best deal we can. And it really, it's true in the sense that having served in government, and this is a board member who teaches public administration here on this campus. So someone at a state school teaching about government, this is somebody in the bubble, the public sector bubble. And it's, the public sector appreciates the private sector because it funds life in the public sector bubble, but other than that, the public sector really doesn't want to hear from the private sector. As that board member said, no, we're in our own place here with our own rules and our own logic. I'm sorry, but our purpose is to pierce that bubble and to, as I said, get that private sector viewpoint into the debate and establish more of an equilibrium between life outside the bubble and life inside the bubble. Contract now goes to the city council. Well, the union needs to vote on it first. At least we're going to follow the charter this time around. I think Councilwoman Stothert and Councilman Thompson, I think we're going to follow the charter this time, have the union vote first, and it'll go to the city contract, to the city council. Now, the private sector view, let's kind of set the stage for this, and we'll get into the contract itself. Firefighters' pay and benefits exceed the private sector in Nebraska. Behrens and Tate did a study using figures from 2006. Now, I know some critics said, oh, Behrens and Tate, that's a pro-business law firm. You can't count on them. Look, get on the internet. Go to USA Today, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, your favorite national publication, and Google things like public sector versus private sector. There have been stories all over the place for years documenting the fact that, well, here's a chart. This is not from the Alliance or Platt Institute for Economic Research or some conservative think tank. BLS is Bureau of Labor Standards. It's the US government, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, excuse me, the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And real easy to follow chart here. Public sector pay outpaces the private sector. This is wages and benefits. Starts over here. See if I can make this match. Oh, it does, okay. Starts over here in 2001 through 2010. Right now, you've got nearly a 10% gap. That red line is state and local government workers versus private sector workers. I got to believe if you add federal workers in there, the disparity might be even greater. Anyway, now, that's just wages and benefits. Where it really gets interesting is when you get into the pensions, all right? Now, here's a private sector way to come at this. When you're trying to think, well, because ultimately our main focus tonight is the pension formula. We think it's got to change. Not surprisingly, we think it needs to go down for this thing to make sense. But look at it from a private sector viewpoint. What pile of money would you have to amass if you're out there on your own to get an annual payout of 65 grand? You want to retire at 50, let's say you're going to live 40 years, you're healthy, and you want 65,000 a year, which is a typical pension that you could get right now in the city of Omaha, fire pension, police pension. On your own out in the private sector, you would need to amass, well, I'm going to throw two numbers at you. The city says we're counting on 8% rate of return interest over the next 40 years, and that's going to help us handle our problem. Now, most financial analysts I talk to, including one sitting in the front row right here, say 8% interest. 5 would be closer to reality probably, and that might even be optimistic. But let's take the better scenario, 8%. You would have to have amassed by age 50, you'd have to have invested 1.2 million. And you better hope that 8% holds up over the rest of your life to get that $65,000 a year guaranteed payout. Now, if the market is not as robust, well, you can see it's almost double the pile of money you would need if you were going to retire at 50 and get a $65,000 payout every year. All right, so that's why. Now, Dave Nabity said this on my radio show one day. We're effectively making firefighters millionaires at age 50. One of our board members who couldn't make it, Luke Van Camp, reached that same conclusion independently at one of our meetings. Now, we had a firefighter called in and said, "Dave Nabity, you're a liar!" When he said that. He said, "You're making it sound, you're saying that the city, when I retire, puts $1 million in my hand or $2 million in my hand and sends me on my way. And that's not what happens. In fact, I could die in 5 years and not collect the rest of it and so forth." And no, we're not saying that that's what the city does, but it's the equivalent of having this $1 million investment when you get that guaranteed retirement payment. In some ways, this defined benefit plan that we have working right now, you could even say it's better than having the pile of money and doing it that way, because no matter what the market does, the city has got to pay you that $65,000 a year. Okay, the council members are nodding their heads yes. In some ways, you could argue this deal right now in our pension system is better than if you had invested $1 million or $2 million and then we're going to live off that the rest of your life. You don't have to worry about the market or anything else. Defined benefit. You get it no matter what. Doesn't matter what you put in, doesn't matter what the market's doing, doesn't matter how the city's doing, you get it no matter what. This, I should have Platt Institute somewhere on this slide. I took this table from information provided by the Platt Institute. The Platt Institute, I mentioned Platt because Platt's been very helpful for us doing research. You see this table full of contracts there? Don't worry, we're not going to go through all of them, but this table full of contracts, New York City, San Francisco, Cincinnati, Omaha, Chicago, St. Paul, Tulsa. With the help of the Platt Institute, we have been pouring through contracts from other cities and comparing them with ours. And a lot of what we want to see changed is because, you see patterns of things that we have that nobody else has, or not to the extent that we offer it in Omaha. And so there's a little prop there to give you an idea of what we've been up to, but I want to acknowledge the Platt Institute because Platt Institute's been very helpful collaborator, very helpful partner for us. All right, so this is from a recent CIR case, and this was the array of cities that were used for comparison. And so, well, you see the numbers of what the taxpayers there contribute to the pension funds, okay? And then you get down to what Omaha would be required to, Omaha taxpayers would be required to contribute under the proposed contract, 32.97%. We'll break down exactly what goes into that in a minute. I'm going to round that up to 33% for purposes of discussing it tonight. That got our attention. Numbers like, well, got your attention in the police contract debate as well. I was not on board with the alliance at that time, but that kind of number gets your attention. Another problem, I'll just note this quickly. To us, it seems like there was a breach of faith. We're going to look at the contract, and one of the main selling points of the new CIR law was that, well, we're going to get soaked paying for this pension problem, but at least under the new CIR law, we're going to get to count every dollar that we're spending on pension contribution toward the compensation of our firefighters. That's going to help us when we're comparing to all these other cities. We're going to look good on compensation because we get to count the pension. Well, it turns out about a third, a little more than a third of what we're contributing to pensions is not going to be counted if we end up in a case before the CIR. I'm sure you saw the World Herald story, Sunday story. CIR law won't guarantee savings to taxpayers. We were told this beautiful new day had dawned in Lincoln, and now we were going to be in the driver's seat, and cities were going to be able to control costs and on and on and on. And I'll tell you what, I wasn't that surprised when I saw that story because we were at that personnel board hearing, And Dave Nabney had about 20 different things. Get rid of this specialty pay, get rid of that, get rid of this, get rid of that. And the city negotiators got back up and said, that's mandated by the CIR, that's mandated by the CIR, that's mandated by the CIR. By the time they were done, I still felt like a prisoner of the CIR, I got to tell you. And then finding out that a big chunk of the pension contribution is not going to be counted after all when we go to the CIR. Not real happy about that. Now still, our position is still, city ought to wait until October for the new CIR law to take effect. Well, at least we get to count about 2/3 of our pension contribution toward compensation, and we get to count benefits in there, and there's a cost of living provision. And actually that's very important for Omaha, because compared to a lot of these other cities, we have a much lower cost of living. So when you're going to do a true comparison of levels of compensation, that helps us. So we do still think that the city ought to wait until October and get the full benefit. Just make sure there's no question that this new law and the advantages that it does offer, we get to capitalize on those. But the CIR still needs some work. Now, whether the legislature will have the stomach for it, who knows? I'm not going to talk about that tonight. We're focusing on the local scene tonight. Now, the city says if you wait, then there are several risks that you're running. The firefighters union has agreed to a wage freeze for 2010 and half of 2011. The city says that'll save us $3.9 million. But the kicker is you got to do the deal now. Boom, got to do it now. That offer's only on the table right now. That expires unless you do the deal now. You make us wait, deal's off. The city says that delays could add up to $125,000 per month to the cost of the contract. There are pending lawsuits out there that could be agitated if the contract negotiations linger on or languish. A couple other risks. This I could not believe they said at the personnel board hearing, that if we don't get this contract done right now, unions will go back to spiking. I can't believe that term is even mentioned in the debate anymore. It shouldn't even be a part of the contract, and I don't understand why the union and the mayor are walking around waving it as a sign of virtue, as a banner of virtue. We're ending spiking. You ought to be quiet about it, not triumphant. Spiking is cheating the system, which is cheating the taxpayers. Okay, again, inside the bubble, I guess if you can get away with it, it's okay. Outside the bubble in the private sector, you'd get smacked down if you try to do stuff like that. We're just setting up a system where people are getting pensions at or above base pay. That's cheating the system. Okay, so to me, spiking ought to just let us never speak of that again. My thought about that is, I dare you, go ahead and do it some more. Do some more spiking. You will just get slaughtered if you do that. But anyway, that was dangled out there as more bait. You want to end spiking, don't you? You better do this deal right now, before October. And the last thing is you just got the feeling, especially in the World Herald story and in that personnel board testimony, all the city can talk about is all the uncertainties and just the dread of going to the CIR. And I'm listening to all this, and I thought, like I said, I thought a new day had dawned. I thought the CIR was our friend. I thought the CIR put us on the high ground now. And I know what it feels like to be on the low ground, to be like the British in Boston in 1776, and the sun comes up, and you look at the hills around Boston, and guess what? The Patriots snuck a bunch of cannons in there from Fort Ticonderoga the night before. They're in Dorchester and the hills surrounding Boston. Oh, crap. Okay. And they withdraw. The superpower of the world at that time withdraws without a shot being fired, without joining the battle. Well, because they saw the lay of the land and pulled out. That's what it used to be like, serving on the Douglas County Board, for instance.